3, 2, 1. All right. Sound check.
Hello.
Check around here.
Okay. Just wait one. All right. Cool. Excellent. Stop streaming. Streaming stopped. All right. Wait for this to roll back over. All right. And we'll get started. Once it's ready to rock and roll, then I will proceed on from there. So the next time you hear me is like when you'll hear some silence for about 30 seconds and then boom, I'll just jump right into it. So good to go?
Good to go.
All right. So where is it? Come on. Come on, damn it. Damn you. Damn it all. Okay, so YouTube. Live. All right. And it looks like we are. All right. All right. We are starting stream. Stream will begin in 3, 2, 1, streaming. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another panel brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project. If you're a new member, do not forget to show this channel some love by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Also, feel free to leave me some comments in the comment section. And if you have any questions throughout the panel, feel free to drop them and I'll read them as soon as I get to them. The purpose of this platform is to exchange ideas and see where our points of view differ and, however, where they are the same. While debate may be an eventuality, I ask the panelists to please be respectful of the other panelists, and it is preferable for there to be no insults. Discuss the issue, don't attack the person. Without further ado, I would like to take the time to welcome some of my panelists this evening. Coming back for a second go around is a good friend of mine, Justin Norton, and I've also got Tio. These are guys are both returning panelists. Some of the other panels have not shown up yet, but if they show up, I'll bring them on. One of the newcomers, however, is we brought Connor from Counterpoints on here, veteran and YouTube content creator that talks about politics and the culture war. So, gentlemen, go ahead and feel free to introduce yourselves. Tio, let's start with you.
Yes, hi, everybody. My name, I go by Blind Tio on the internet. I'm a political activist and a freelance jazz musician. You can find me on YouTube for my music and blindness content at The Blind Bassist. My main instrument is the bass, and I'm going to be starting to do some political content soon. So stay tuned for our Blind Tio YouTube channel. So,
all right, Connor.
Yeah, my name's Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I identify as centrist or center right. I'm a statist. Sorry to announce that to some of the libertarian parts of the audience. But basically, I spend a majority of my time breaking down like science fiction content, military content, law enforcement content, and then also I like to go onto twitch.tv and yell at leftists. That's one of my main hobbies. So despite finding some levels of like descriptive agreement or some policies that I can shift on, typically we'll go together until we can't, and then I lose my mind and I try not to pop a blood vessel behind my eyeball while I'm yelling at people. And that's basically what I do for fun. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then the easiest way to find me is go to YouTube, type in Counterpoints Common Spelling. You can find me. We just broke 10K subscribers. Very excited about that. Alternatively, you can go onto Twitter, type in _counterpoints_, and then you'll be able to find me.
Fantastic. Justin, hit me.
My name's Justin. You can find me on Politically Provoked as a guest commentator from time to time, and over here on the Alex Kirsch Project, my second time around. I fall more on the Reagan right of things, constitutionalist, and I too enjoy like going on and trolling liberals across any platform I can find them, which is they're everywhere. So that's what I enjoy doing.
Yeah, fantastic. And gentlemen, I just want to take the time to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come out here and become part of this panel. Hopefully I can, return the favor someday if you guys have panels, or you're always welcome back here. So getting right into the topic. So this week, we're going to take a look at one issue that I feel is continuously being discussed all across the U.S. at this moment, and that is the question of government. How much government is too much government? Mankind, since its creation, has formed hierarchies and governments simply because, like any other members of the animal kingdom, we require some level of structure and semblance of order. Government is by definition a political system to which a country or community is regulated by laws and structure. How you may view a government is by monarchies, oligarchy, democracies, which democracies, for those not aware, are of Greek and of Roman origin. However, the reason I chose this topic is because everyone in this panel has a different idea of government and when a government becomes too powerful or isn't big enough, and what would be the most ideal form of government. In the history of the world, each government has shown where it has succeeded and where it has failed. Some people, especially in the United States, feel the government is becoming way too powerful and oppressive with policies like the Patriot Act, gun control, gun rights laws, mask mandates, COVID closedowns, etc. And we've been told since 2001, maybe even earlier, the government has implemented policies like this for our own good, for our own safety. So getting right to it, each panelist is going to give an opening statement on their ideal form of government and when they think a government has far exceeded its authority and how they think it should be put in check into a peaceful manner. Okay, so your opening statement, once again, you have 1 to 5 minutes, and we'll go ahead and start with Justin. Go.
So Benjamin Franklin said it best, and I paraphrase, that when the people can find out that they can vote money from the treasury, the republic will fall. And for the last 80 years since the Great Depression and President Franklin Roosevelt, you've seen a gradual expansion of the federal government in this country to the point where in 2016, the Federal Registry, which is the regulations that guide the federal agencies, was 96,000 pages long. That is an invasion into every aspect of American life, from the amount of water a toilet can use to the gun control laws that people complain about. And now we have things like these COVID restrictions where the CDC is having the powers to prevent, people being evicted for rent. This is not something the founding fathers had envisioned. Now, I'm not against all regulations. I'm not an anarchist. That's where a lot of the people on the left think that Republicans believe in no regulation. That's not true. We believe in common sense regulations. President Trump issued an executive order saying that for every new regulation proposed, 2 old regulations need to be removed. The American people were, set to be free, not regulated by the government from cradle to grave that most liberals want. So the common sense approach is a smaller federal government. However, I support activism amongst the states. Each state, according to the 10th Amendment, can have various economic regulations and things of that nature. For example, Massachusetts implemented a statewide statewide insurance program. Now, in a competitive democracy, we can see how Massachusetts turns out. And if other states don't like that, they don't have to adopt it. But if another state like Texas or California come up with better programs, for example, California, a state I often criticize, actually has some better healthcare outcomes with some better policies that they have.
Connor?
Yeah, so I unfortunately I kind of probably agree with a decent chunk of those sentiments while not agreeing with the actual prescribed outcomes, and also have to appeal to pragmatism. I think that we have to look at what we want for a healthy, happy society. I think we have to look at what we want in order to create healthy, happy American families, and that's what we need to do. What I mean by that is I am a mixed economy capitalist. I think the market can control a majority, like vast majority of what the market does, with some regulation and all that kind of stuff. And basically people are best left to their own devices a decent chunk of the time. But I do think there are things that are market failures. I don't think that I don't think private security can be an additional thing that's done, but I don't think law enforcement should be privatized. Same thing with the military. I don't think the military should be privatized. Same thing with, actually, I would extend this into education and the medical field, where one of the things that I consistently bring up is the fact that there's something called price elasticity. Which is basically like, how much you can move a price before people stop paying for it. Well, most people will pay any price in order to continue to survive. So when it comes to healthcare, it's pretty clear that a market-based solution for healthcare, while you can have private markets on top of public markets, there should absolutely be a public option on the federal level. We can talk about how the way this country was originally envisioned versus what it is now, the creeping encroachment in government and the definitions of freedom. I would actually think that that would be a pretty interesting conversation, because the truth is that American conceptions of freedom often deal with freedom from the government. The government can't tell me what to do. But there are different kinds of freedom, like the freedom or the ability to do certain things, whether that's economically or socially or anything like that. So I'm actually really interested to explore the general, because I think I'll be able to explain some concepts that maybe folks haven't heard of before. So I'll leave it there for now.
Appreciate it. Tio.
All right, great. Well, as I said, I'm a political activist. So a lot of my politics are a lot different than what I call normies discuss in normal politics. So I'm actually a leftist. I'm an anarchist, anarcho-pacifist specifically, out of the Thoreau, from Thoreau's Civil Disobedience, that literature, which led to Leo Tolstoy's The Kingdom of God is Within, which was like the father of Christian anarchism, which is where I get my values from. Which then Gandhi and Tolstoy exchanged a lot of letters, which led to Gandhi's civil disobedience, which led to Martin Luther King and his democratic socialism. So even though I consider myself on the left, and both these gentlemen also describe themselves very similar to what the founders were envisioning, I also, Thomas Paine is my favorite founder. And I think that his system that he envisioned, and including his works after Common Sense, but also his work during the French Revolution, we're talking about government by consent of the governed. And a lot of Rousseau. I don't know if we want to get into social contracts. I don't know how deep into political science we want to get into, or just more, pragmatic issues. But basically, most people don't even understand what anarchists strive for. It's not anarchy. In a sense, it's hierarchies only by deserved hierarchies. So we want to tear down any hierarchies that are undeserved. We believe power corrupts, and that the person in the higher station has the burden of proof as to whether they deserve that station. And if they cannot meet that burden of proof, that hierarchy should be dismantled, which in the American system is a very anarchistic system, because we elect the people, and if they don't meet the burden of proof, we elect someone else. There are some things that have happened to our system that have usurped the democracy. But then also, if we want to talk about the political science or the philosophy of it, I also like to think about Aristotle, because he talked about 3 different types of positive governments and 3 different types of negative government. And they kind of have different meanings from the words that we use today. But he said monarchy, or we would call it benevolent monarchy today, was the good, where one person ruled with interest of everyone else. And the bad of that is tyranny. And then it's aristocracy, which is supposed to be ruled by the best, or the aristocrats are supposed to be the most socially highest, right? And then oligarchy is the bad form of that, where it's a small group of people ruling for their own interests. And then he had policity, which is what we use when we say democracy today, which was a group where a majority were the people voted for the whole. And democracy was the bad one, which was a small group of people voting for their own interests, as opposed to the interests of the greater society. So what we think of in our modern parlance, democracy is what Aristotle was talking about, policity. And what Aristotle said is for a democracy not to fall into chaos, or not to fall into where those that have less vote to get more from those that have more. It would make most sense for there to be as much equality as possible. Like the ideal would be a bell curve, where there would be just as much ultra rich as there are ultra poor, and everybody else would be mostly in the middle. That way, most of the interests of all of society would be voted for. So I'm a big fan of Aristotle on that. And I think that these gentlemen, if we went back 100 years, would consider themselves leftists because labor in America was always on the left. Eugene Debs, W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois, how he pronounced it. And I don't know why we have forgotten that, like, federalism versus nationalism, the federalists are on the left compared to the nationalists. So I know they, love to dunk on liberals. I also like to dunk on what I call bleeding heart woke skulls, because I think anytime that we engage in identity politics, that's a Machiavellian play by the ruling class, the honor class, to keep the working class from uniting. And I think for us to achieve democracy, like, people need to not be stuck in wage slavery, which I can get into that a little further. We talked about Jefferson's agrarian liberty and Thomas Paine's agrarian justice, some things I'd like to talk about. So look forward to the panel. Thanks for having me back, Alex.
Absolutely. Anytime. All right. Fantastic. So since we're a little bit shorter on panelists today, and unless they start showing up, originally I was going to ask a question and you'd be given 3 minutes to answer. But since the panel's sitting what at, we can go up to 5 minutes. I've got 5-minute timers. Okay. So we'll go ahead and go right into the questions. Okay. Now, after everyone's answered their questions, if anybody wants to do any follow on, let me know, and then we'll go from there. Okay. We'll just kind of adjust fire. So first question. Okay. And the first question is going to go to Connor. Should a government implement a policy, even if it affects the freedom of movement for their society?
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely depends. If we're talking about, like, the ability to move from state to state, yeah, there's absolutely cases in which freedom of movement should be restricted. Immigration is definitely one of them. National security is definitely one of them. Terrorism is definitely one of them, depending on the market. So, drugs in particular, I know that everybody wants to decriminalize and, legalize drugs and all that kind of stuff. I can get on board with some of that stuff, but I still think trafficking of hard drugs is absolutely something that should be controlled. So I am completely okay with border controls. I am completely okay with common sense regulation of movement. That being said, I think the market is best, when it's left alone for the most part. So I think people are best when they're left alone. So what has to happen, this is going to kind of tie into my economic takes too. You have to prove that there's some kind of failure that free people are making in order to exercise some kind of authority over them. And on top of that, it can't be like a perfect, we're looking for a perfect society in which no drugs get anywhere. That's obviously not a case to basically start doing, drug checkpoints at every single state border or random searches of vehicles or anything like that. I think the American constitutional framework, where we have the Fourth Amendment basically saying that the government shouldn't mess with your stuff, unless they actually have a reason to. I think that's a really good spirit of the law that we should follow. So yeah, there's obviously motivations for it, but I think the powerful have to articulate why any of that stuff needs to be done. And that I think everybody here is kind of saying that you need the consent of the governed. I completely agree with that. If we don't have a government that cares about the consent of the governed, I don't even know what we're doing.
All right, appreciate it. Teal, what do you think?
In my ideal world, and I can talk ideology or we can talk pragmatic, practicality. Ideally, no, the government would have no control over freedom of movement. The government that governs least governs best. Thomas Paine, I'll quote him a lot, but he thought that the main idea of government was to regulate those would-be masters of industry that could use their economic wealth to cause themselves to gain more political advantage. That way they get laws passed for them. And even like talking about hard drugs, and I can understand, trying to find some ways socially to make hard drugs something that's more difficult for people to engage in. But at the same time, you got to think what it causes is black markets. We look at the prohibition of alcohol, and that just led to more crime. And, at first, alcoholism went down, and then, eventually once people started learning how to, skirt the system, bribe the right person, bribe the right judge, things turned out not as intended. So I think we have to be careful of that. It's funny, one of my band's records, my old band Free Radicals, was called Freedom of Movement. Plug for that. You can find it on all the places. But Yeah, I definitely think that if the government wants to try to restrict people's freedom, like it should be something that is agreed on by consent of the governed, like Connor said, and it should be in extreme cases, like war. I could see, like we're being attacked, and martial law, and stay in this zone, or. But as a political activist, I was not even a fan of curfews. I mean, I understand why they would want to pass curfews, but oftentimes those political elements, if we look in history, have always been helping the owner class, or the people that are striking, or the people that are fighting for their rights, are the ones that the law enforcement ends up being used against those people. So like Franklin said, that those who would give up a little freedom for protection deserve neither, or something like that, paraphrasing there.
Yeah.
And that's really what I believe. So I believe any restrictions of freedom of movement should be very rare, and only at consent of the people.
Certainly. I gotcha. All right, Justin, what do you think?
So only one class in American society have freedom of, or restrictive movement, and those are prisoners, and that's where it should stay. I actually believe things like residency requirements should be struck down as unconstitutional. It's not my fault that the city school systems that some city destroyed, that I moved out of, now forces me to move back into to live because I'm a police officer there or something like that. I concur with the other two panelists that really freedom of movement can only be restricted under extreme emergencies where it's been presented to the public for the justification. For example, in the peak of the COVID pandemic, I was in Maryland at another duty station performing some government work, not classified or anything crazy like that. I was just fixing some computers, and they were serious talk of locking down the airlines. But where was the science really to support that? Now, it never really emerged, but there was a big threat, and everyone was in a big panic about leaving. They told me to leave immediately and come back home, and instead I went home to New York instead, where it was COVID was rampaging all over the state. But again, the government needs permission from the people to impose those kinds of measures. So I agree with the other two panelists. Only in the extreme emergencies, police intervention, things like that, should the American people ever be subjected to, not being able to travel wherever they want to go.
Okay, so like a quick follow-on question then for everybody. Do you think like that then the people, they feel like they are being restricted by their rights? And anybody can answer at one point. If any point, do you think if the people are like, wait a second, something doesn't seem right here, do you think the people should have a right to question it?
Yeah. Yes, General Assembly. That's one of the things in First Amendment, definitely. And I think we don't exercise that enough. That's what I love about, I mentioned him before, Henry David Thoreau, because at his time, people were, when the president was elected, you're not supposed to argue, you just should wait till the next election. And his pamphlet or essay called Civil Disobedience says, no, if your government is doing something unjust, it is your duty as an American to stand up to that injustice. So,
all right, wait, one of our panelists is jumping in. So we're gonna bring her on. This is Nia Morai.
Alan has joined the meeting.
We'll just let her just jump right on in. All right.
Fuck my.
Oh.
There we go.
Hey, how you doing, Neil?
Pretty good.
All right.
I love that I just doxed myself too.
Yeah, you want me to change it real quick?
Everybody ignore that.
I'm gonna change that.
Give me one
I'll change
second
it.
here. All right. Yeah, I'm so used to using this for work, and then I just jumped off. It's like, whoa.
Got you covered. I already fixed it for you. So go ahead and introduce yourself real quick, and then I'll ask the first question, and just once you introduce yourself, then you can kind of give me your idea of a ideal government, and then I'll ask you the first question that I asked everybody else. So go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
All right. I am Neo Morai. I'm a Twitch streamer at twitch.tv/Neo Morai. I often do panels. I talk about economics, politics, how we could sort of bring the really, really insane far left people a bit further to the center, and how we could bring the absolutely batshit insane people on the far right a little bit closer to the center. I used to identify as center left, although ever since moving to Singapore, the party that I'm with is center right, and we heavily promote civic nationalism. And in general, people have been freaking out about that.
Dope.
So
Well, most people don't know the difference between civic nationalism and other types of nationalism. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
that's all right. So essentially, like, what would be your idea of like a government, essentially, like, in about, if you can sum that up in about 3 minutes, that'd be awesome. And then I'll ask the first question to you then.
Okay, so a government, the perfect government system for me would probably be one that, okay, it's going to be a mixed system economy. It doesn't interfere as much as lefties want it to. Like, I don't want governments going in and just stealing businesses from owners and giving them to workers. I do believe that government should provide healthcare for people. I believe that there should be basic government housing. I'm a little bit split on where I stand with things like housing vouchers or like Section 8 in America. I do believe that like every other country in the world, we should actually have a 2-year mandatory service in any armed forces or civic duty that you can potentially participate in, if possible. And in general, I think that voting should be mandatory.
Okay. All right. So I've asked everybody else this first question. So, and you'll get 5 minutes to answer this question. So the first question was, should a government implement policy even if it affects the freedom of movement of their society? Go ahead.
Absolutely not. I don't believe that anybody should be restricted in terms of movement. Like even back when we go back to the Articles of Confederation, when every state had its own currency, we could see that there was no such thing as like interstate passports.
Okay. Appreciate it. All right. So we'll go ahead and go right on into the next question. Okay. So we'll start with Tio. All right. So the question is, was the Patriot Act for the United States or any other legislation that could interpret as a means of violating someone's constitutional rights as a means of national security justified? Why or why not?
I definitely didn't think it was justified. I don't think it's justified now. I didn't think it was justified then. It was one of the things we were protesting back then. The leftists were very against the Patriot Act. And honestly, we looked at even like the events of Afghanistan. We thought that should have been handled more like a law enforcement, like a CIA kind of thing, not actually necessarily bringing the whole military force against terrorism as opposed to against nation states. Like I thought it was a ploy by the military industrial complex class to start their forever wars that they had been trying to start but they had a little hitch in the road when Vietnam and the people spoke up and said, hey, we don't want to send our young men to die for the military industrial complex. And they snuck it in again. They snuck the forever wars in on us, 20 years in Afghanistan. And I was against that. Like I don't want to repeat my paraphrase of Franklin, but I definitely agree with that it was unconstitutional. It was un-American to call for those, and the way they demonized, some of the whistleblowers is pathetic to me. Those people are our heroes, talking to us about how our government is spying on us. But oftentimes in the media, especially, they're treated like criminals, which and the people should, be fighting for those people's freedom, And that's my take.
Okay. Neil. You muted still.
Yeah, honestly, when it comes to the Patriot Act, I'm a firm believer in the notion that if you give up a little bit of freedom for security, you get neither. There were definitely things that we could have done that weren't absolute intrusions into civil liberties of people. The FBI and the CIA obviously had knowledge enough of the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Nobody happened to do anything about those. And I don't believe that the fact that they failed to act on the information they were given justified massive breaches and expansions of the NSA.
Okay. Connor.
Yeah, happy to be getting into some disagreement already. So,
That's fine.
So the really, what I would have to see is basically like obviously Patriot Act's the surveillance state as we know it. They're kind of contingent on FISA warrants. Unfortunately, a lot of these things are opaque. They're not things that we can take a look at. And they say that they're opaque because they have to protect us. I think that in order for us to truly know exactly what's going on and if these breaches are abuses, we would actually have to see how the warrants process was conducted. And maybe, 10, 20 years from now, but maybe not 10, 20 years, maybe going back to the early thousands, maybe after 10 years, FISA protection should be, basically reduced, and we should get to learn how these things are being used and abused. The only way that you can fight basically a authoritarian breach of, basically civil rights or civil process is if you're aware of it. Unfortunately, right now, the process seems pretty opaque. I think there are situations in which, basically surveillance state spying is completely justified. If there were people who were American nationals sympathetic to terrorist organizations overseas, NSA had an algorithm in order to watch out for keywords. They identified these people, they found out the relationships of these people, and they were moving, basically moving in order to do terrorist strikes. These are absolutely the kind of tools that you would want in order to hunt down these people and kill them. And I'm basically good with all of that. The question is whether or not these things are being abused and whether or not these things can be used against American citizens in the future. When we're talking about the right wing right now, a lot of people who are libertarian, who actually believe in the Constitution, are being called terrorists. People who, basically are right wing and conservative, they're being called terrorists. So is this a slippery slope where basically they can bring the war on terror internationally home and start using it against their own citizens in order to maintain their power? And I absolutely see that slippery slope, and I'm terrified of it. So I'm not always the centrism with me. I think we need to find out exactly how it's being used, see if it's being used properly. If it's not, put in checks in order to make it work properly. But no, especially after 9/11, I think we need an internet style spying apparatus, and I'll leave it there.
Okay. Justin, what you got?
I mean, the Patriot Act was relatively hastily put together post 9/11. Most of the controversial aspects of it have been struck down by the courts. I mean, that's why we have a checks and balances. But I agreed with the general purpose behind it, which is, expanding surveillance of potential domestic and foreign terrorists and whatnot. I agree that there should be a little bit more transparency in what is going on. They can't hide behind national security for every issue at every point in time. However, the fact that the nature of everything is changing. This isn't the 1950s where we could just drop a bug in a lampshade anymore. Everything is electronic, and that unfortunately we need an apparatus that watches things like the carnivore program that the FBI used that looked for keywords and emails that helped track down certain terrorists and overseas and whatnot. So there has to be a balance. We shouldn't have a complete invasion of privacy. There should be more transparency in what is going on, but in this day and age, we have to have some kind of observation. And in other nations like England, as leftists always like to tout the European Union, I mean, they have cameras everywhere observing everybody. So when a crime occurs, it's caught on multiple cameras. I don't think the NSA should have cameras everywhere pointing, in every direction. But, this is what we're moving towards to. Technology is changing, and things like the Patriot Act help the bureaucracy actually catch up. Which part of my earlier thing about, too much government is that government should actually sit down once a year and look at updating and looking at different regulations to improve them with the course of time. And the Patriot Act has been modified numerous times since its original passing and struck down. A lot of it struck down by the courts. But it was just renewed again by both Democrats and Republicans up for a vote. I believe it. I don't know if it's past 2021 yet because it was up for renewal, but it's lasted 20 years so far. So both parties apparently agree in certain parts. Of course, as Connor said, now the Democrats are all about the Patriot Act because they're calling conservatives such as myself that supported President Trump terrorists and whatnot. So now they're just trying to use it against us.
Can we open this up a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot there. Unfortunately, I took like the more Patriot Act side, and then Justin kind of brought up like the thing that I'm absolutely terrified of. Like so,
That's what I wanted to bring up too, actually.
Yeah,
the first and second Red Scares, man.
Yeah,
and that's why Jefferson kicked out Adams, because the Sedition Act. Like, no, man.
Yeah, and that's my thing is like I think there has to be like a certain level of like built-in, almost like designed incompetence, right? Like there has to be like a certain level of like blind eye, because bringing up the UK where they have like a CCTV system that's in public that kind of watches the public and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand how you don't feel like you're literally just living under Big Brother. Yeah, and like especially with the CCP coming out with like the social credit system, viewing how these things could be combined even by liberal democracies to basically shrink the Overton window to only a certain level of political discourse that's acceptable by elites. And then basically checking in on everybody who ever challenges power ever. That's actually like a very sincere fear of mine. The real infrastructural thing that I think is acceptable is kind of like a almost like a blind algorithmic keyword search that's basically looking for a combination of words like ISIS, bomb, Capitol building, like all that kind of stuff, and then it basically looks for those collations and all that kind of stuff, and then at some point an analyst can look at those collations and then see like, oh hey, this is literally just Joe Normie six-pack looking at basically looking at news articles and talking about current events and all that kind of stuff. We don't need to worry about this guy. Let's there's nothing here, let's keep it moving. But that algorithmic process would be blind. But then basically in order to launch a counterterrorism investigation or something like that, like the collation of the data and the analysis for the context in which those words would have to be used as a build-up for a warrant, like a actual law enforcement warrant, especially on the domestic front. And that's kind of where my fear, I'll stop talking in a second. But my very sincere fear is that if you did have like the CCTV system or the social credit system, or if you allowed this this program that I'm talking about to be opaque, then you could basically use it for whatever you wanted to use it for. You could use it against political opponents. You could use it to shrink the Overton window, and I'm terrified of that. 100%.
And what's an illegal search too is what I want to ask.
Right.
To me, that's considered an illegal search.
There was the original notion that when the NSA first developed the Project Trailblazer, which they abandoned for Threadripper, it was a randomized search, and you couldn't decrypt any data about the citizen that was actually going through until you actually had a judge from an actual court and not from a closed door court session. So if we used a system like that, I would definitely be in favor of it, because right now I guarantee you there are probably about 1,000 different dipshits on Twitter trying to message the ISIS accounts to see how they could fucking join and go over to Iraq and like find out that it's not all fucking pushing fucking daisies and shit like that. Okay. So the one thing that I do agree with is using all of the CCTV footage, all of the facial identification stuff that we have, even just seeing, like, as much as I fucking hated January 6th, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to curb the language here.
It's okay.
But as much as I disdain what happened on the 6th, the fact that we're going through and literally using computational photography to piece together people is absolutely frightening, because what's to stop that from just identifying you from like, oh, your meter was over for 5 seconds, so now you're getting automatically dim.
Can I make this even worse real quick?
Go ahead. Go about 30 seconds.
Yeah, New York Police Department, and I want to say it was like Chicago or someplace else, they started using those robot dogs, right, in order to clear rooms. Awesome. Cops don't have to take any risk, and the public is interacting with unaccountable robots. That's great. And then another municipality started using the robot dogs with an eye scanner, allegedly to start scanning the eyes of the homeless to see whether or not they were infected with COVID. And this is like all of my nightmares coming together really quickly.
Well, Tio brought up a very interesting point, and I hadn't thought about asking this question, but I feel it's very relevant. After the Boston Marathon bombing, there was actually federal agents and law enforcement that was just going from house to house actually looking for the Tsarnaev brothers. Now, at any point, the government can say, "Oh, well, there's a national security threat. We have to go source through your house." Do you think at any point, and I'll just go Tio, Connor, Justin, and then Neo, and you can just answer real quickly. If at any point, for the sake of national security, a terrorist threat just took place, we have to search your house, even though you know for a fact this person's not in there. Is that like when you feel like, hey, something's not right here? They're basically just making any reason to come through our house. So go ahead, Tio.
I would feel that it's an infringement of the Constitution. I would.
Mm-hmm. Connor?
Yeah. So for me, I'm good with it because you're not going to have a city left if like a bomb goes off and destroys, like dirty bomb goes off and destroys half the city, right? But here's the thing about that. Anything discovered during those non-constitutional searches should not be usable in court. Literally, I don't care if they find like $1 billion meth lab. Sorry, you get away with this one. Have fun.
Justin?
I think when people see something like the Boston bombing and then the police are going through the neighborhoods, I think generally the neighborhood would agree with the police search. I agree with Connor, though. If they find something else illegal, that's not the why that they're there, and they would probably have to let it go. So that's where I would stand on it. I mean, they're looking for a specific person or persons. I think everything else should be off the table. I mean, you went through enough barrack searches. I mean, they know you're in the military. What kind of weird stuff did you find? Now imagine being in day-to-day society, what you're going to walk in on, some lawnmower attached thing, vibrating in the living room. Yeah, I'm going to pretend I didn't see that, and I'm going to go look for what I need to find.
All right, Neo.
All right, controversial opinion here. I agree with Connor, and I know that Supreme and Zonia are watching this, so it's going to trigger the hell out of Supreme. But I believe that if a terrorist attack has happened and there are fugitives actively on the loose, that should be counted just as well as it does for when fugitives escape prison. You're looking for people who are at large, and if it comes to the fact that you believe that there is reasonable suspicion that they are in your backyard or they're in your garage or they're, for example, in the Boston bombing example, hiding in the boat in your backyard, the police should absolutely be allowed to go through and search. They have probable cause. They're on a manhunt. They're looking for people that just got them blowing, limbs off people. What's to stop the next thing from happening where somebody wraps like americium in tinfoil and then next thing you know, half of New York's got cancer?
Very fair point. All right, move on to the next question. Okay, now that we got more panelists, we're going to kind of take down the answers to about 3 minutes. But if you need a follow on, just let me know and I'll add another 30 seconds. Okay, so this first question is going to go to Neo. Would society be better off under a theocratic government, whether it was Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, etc.? Basically, if there's an entire country or state that one's run strictly as a theocracy, the church, whatever religion is in charge, do you think a society would be better off in that regard?
In all honesty, I don't believe that any religion should have any specific kind of that's kind of like a meme because I'm Singaporean and American. Obviously, I'm Tajik, so everybody thinks that I'm in favor of Sharia law and all this shit. No, I believe that we should have a democracy. I don't believe that we should have any fucking say from religion. I believe that we should go through from what the founding fathers said. They wrote the Constitution from, if any sort of religious perspective, a very deist perspective, one where God was essentially just like leaving us to our own devices. Religion has nothing to do with the Constitution. Religion has nothing to do with civil rights. Religion has nothing to do with personal liberties. I'm not Thomas Hobbes. All that shit could fuck off unless if we're starting like some empire, like some imperial regime where we're gonna have like space marines.
All right, Tio.
Definitely no theocracy ever. Like any dogmatic views in general. I think that what I love about the Constitution is it has stipulations to amend it, because whenever you stick to something that's dogmatic, it can be misused, misinterpreted. Definitely no theocracy. And I think the panelists that would be didn't show up tonight that would have been pushing for that. because there are actually some people on the far right out there that are like theocratic monarchists, unironically. And yeah, I'm like the exact opposite of those people. I'm an anarchist, so definitely not a monarchist or theocratic.
Okay, Justin.
No, I'm definitely not a theocratic form of government or a dictatorship or a monarchy. You know, I support America as a representative republic. However, that being said, that's the form of government. As far as cultural cohesion, having a common language or a similar religious background does help in keeping the culture intact because you have similar views, similar values. So if the United States was fully 100% Protestant or fully 100% Catholic, you would definitely see better cultural cohesion than what we have now. However, there's no real way to get there because I believe in the free exercise of religion, so you can worship whatever you want.
Okay, Connor.
I think I'm tearing up a little bit because I haven't heard anything insane over the past 120 seconds, and I'm so used to it. Like I'm just like, it's just like oh. I'm so happy.
Quick, let's change our answers.
Yeah, so no, not only no theocracy, but hell no. And I'm a civic nationalist, so I basically think that there should be some very firm rooted principles that we care about when it comes to America in particular. I think what I boiled it down to was freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, the right to self-defense, including the right to defend yourself against your own government, and limited government, meaning that when the government creates rules, it has to abide by its own rules. I think these are beliefs that anybody who wants to come into our country has to subscribe to. And if they don't want to subscribe to it, then they can pound sand someplace else. They can go create their own little theocracy wherever the hell they want. If they want to start, throwing sand and creating an island in the Pacific or the Mediterranean, I don't care. Go do it someplace else. That's not our bag. So yeah, hell no. And like I'm having feelings right here.
All up in the feelings. There we go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Anybody else want to add on to it, or can we proceed on to the next question?
I'm ready to go.
All right, excellent. So this next question is going to come to Justin. Is there any country, in your point of view, that's doing government the correct way, and should the U.S. emulate them, or is the United States doing government the correct way in your assessment? Go ahead.
The United States is doing it the best way. A representative form of government with our Constitution in writing is the best way to go. The founders wanted a very slow moving national government. That's why it does take years and years to really pass bills that would change fundamentally the way society looks at government. In England, their Bill of Rights is not even written down. They just kind of make it up as they go along. And even though other European countries have constitutions, historically, the conservative side has been a large authoritarian type government. That's what Europe was founded on, monarchies and kings and queens and whatnot. The United States had a unique form of government. A representative republic was so new that when the founding fathers put it together, they didn't know it was going to last. We were at war with the British in the War of 1812, only 40 years after really the founding. And then the Civil War just 50 years later. So it was no guarantee we were going to survive. But I feel that this is the best form of government we could possibly have. There's other parts and aspects of other forms of government. I don't really agree with mandatory voting. I feel that voting is a right, but you can choose not to vote. National healthcare systems that other states support. We can have a raging debate about that and other things that other forms of government do, but representative republic is the way to go.
Okay. Connor.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is doing exactly what I want, because what I want is a little bit different from probably the way anybody has ever conceptualized government anywhere, because I'm really trying to synthesize the arguments of, like, I don't know, half a dozen different political philosophies. So what I would say is rooted in libertarian or liberalism, that should be like the beginning, is like individual rights. But we have to move into communitarianism, where we basically care about the collective as well. And so that's where like the civic nationalism comes in. And also I think we have to be honest about when there's market failures. So for me, as I mentioned previously, like I think healthcare, education, healthcare, and security are three things that I don't think should ever be done by the private market. The private market can they can help, they can do more, but the government are the people who should do it, because you shouldn't have a profit incentive when it comes to these industries specifically. And so basically what I would say is the closest thing that exists on the planet is maybe like Switzerland, because they have like a decent, they're mixed economy capitalists. They have a decent distributive social safety net, but then they also have state issued assault rifles. So that's based.
Awesome. Oh, the base terms. All right. Speaking of base, Tio, hit me next.
There's like Connor said, there's not any government that's existed long term, especially that would kind of have my ideals. Like, to me, I think of anarchism as a system, not necessarily an end goal. It's, always questioning authority, not necessarily like freedom's not free and it'll never be free. And even a benevolent king today, or a great representative today, could become corrupt tomorrow. So you always have to question authority. What I love most about the American system is the Bill of Rights, especially the right of the press, free press. That's some things that other places in Europe don't have as much. I think Americans take it for granted. The free press, the right to assemble and petition the government. Like they're not even really allowed to do that in the UK and Australia. And but there's some things that I do like. I'm not against like mandatory registration for voting. Like if you want to just hand in your voter registration card empty, that's fine too. Like you have that right, but I don't see a problem with that. But some things I think Australia does better. Sometimes I think a parliamentary system might be better than the Senate. I mean, I think a lot of big problem that when the founders started the nation, democracy was brand new. Representative democracy and republics were new. It's mostly monarchies. So there was a little, they put in some fail safes because, a lot of the people were uneducated. That's why Jefferson wanted people to, be their own landowners and be self-sustaining, because they would have to be competent, because he wanted, more people to be competent to have a successful democracy. So they put some fail safes in the three great compromises that Madison kind of thought up. And I think that we need to think about getting rid of some of those and now that we have modern education system or public education, I think it is time for us to think of more direct ways of democracy. Like I love recall elections. I have seen nothing wrong with that. Like if somebody's, a month into their term, like what's his name?
Or 8 months,
Turtle.
like Joe Biden.
Well, yeah, well, that too. But like Turtle, man, like he was taking the fall for a lot of hard right stuff because he knew he wouldn't be up for election for 6 years, right? Mitch
McConnell, yeah.
Mitch McConnell, yeah. He was doing a lot of stuff like that too. And yeah, Biden too, but yeah. Sorry. And just getting to more, more transparency, more direct democracy, more bottom-up democracy, more federalism, less, more balance of powers, less strong central national government, more like federal, municipal, more power there, balance, each other more.
Okay. Excellent.
Alex, can I follow on one thing?
Let Neil go first and then you can follow on. So
Gotcha.
Neil.
Yeah, I would love to be the resident non-American simp. I would love to say that America has the perfect, most amazing, most awesome structure ever and go on and sound like I'm Bastier or something. The problem is that there are a lot of things that we could change. Like we do definitely need to fix the fact that we are the only like first world country that does not have a form of healthcare. We need to make sure that our veterans are taken care of more. We need to make sure that our elderly are taken care of more. We need to make sure that there is some sort of assistance to at least provide, like maybe bring back Obama's 2 free years of community college. I do enjoy the Constitution because it puts a lot of emphasis on the local level. A lot of people like to ignore the fact that, the local level is extremely important and that you could go to basically any city meeting and sit there and yell at somebody until they shut down something that you don't want. But in general, no, I would have to say there's a lot of things that we need to fix. We need universal health care. We need we need basic safety nets. And also, like, we're the only country on earth that guarantees you the right that if somebody comes knocking at your door, you don't have to say anything. Everybody focuses on the fact that you could say anything that you want. And I feel like we never focus on the fact that you could actually say nothing. And I think that that speaks a lot for the Constitution that we have. The fact of the matter is that people found a lot of ways to get around it, though.
Okay, fair. All right, Justin, go ahead.
So I actually do think one shit should change, but not the actual structure of the government. But I actually feel the president and the members of Congress should sit like they do in the UK, where the president's in the middle with his party behind him and the opposition party in front. Because I really love watching like members of the Labour Party get up and just start screaming at the prime minister for his failures, and the conservatives booing behind him. I really enjoy that. And then even in some Eastern European countries, they're like beating each other up. And we need more of that in Congress these days, not this polite stuff. But I think that would change. That'd be a nice change.
Any additional thoughts to follow up with that, or are we ready to move on to the next question?
I would follow up. Is actually Franklin got that idea from the Iroquois, because the Iroquois, or the Haudenosaunee, as they call themselves, would watch the Americans doing, because they were upstairs in the First Continental Congress, like Samuel Adams especially loved the Mohawks, so he would go upstairs and like ask them, like, what do you think we could do better? And that's one of the things that the Iroquois said, is that people talking over each other, that they're not actually listening. And kind of what Alex is talking about the blood sports. So I don't know, I kind of do like that we have some decorum and one person speaks at a time, but maybe it's my indigenous blood. So
no, I completely get that. So all right, so one of the this is the second to last question. So and we will start with Tio and then Neo. So okay, so this question: is the U.S. doomed to fail on its current system of government with a two-party system?
No, not doomed to fail. There's always going to be a left and a right. When people, I'm really big into political science and political literacy. And that's one of the things I want to start on my podcast, or that I'm starting soon, is actually talking about what left and right is. To me, right is the current hierarchy, or you support the current hierarchy, and left is you want to dismantle that current hierarchy. Like I'm talking about, that's how anarchists view things. Like, is that hierarchy just? Does that hierarchy need to be dismantled? People on the right think that hierarchy is just and want to continue. People on the left think something about it needs to be dismantled. So even though I kind of like the idea of a parliamentary system where we, different, single voter people can go to that single voter party and they can collaborate with other people of like-minded ideas to get more ideas passed. Like, I could see that being a positive thing, but that kind of already exists, because we have, in history, we had it more. In history, we had, conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans. Like, more and more, we've gotten more polarized lately. And, throughout history, that polarization happened before too. Like, if you look at 1900, William Jennings Bryan and the populist parties, and McKinley, who was getting supported by the big corporate owner class. And that started that. Anyway, sorry, I read too much history, but no, I think we can keep going. I think we just need to, number one thing to fix what's wrong now, Citizens United. Corporations should not be able to allow to donate to politicians or political campaigns. They're buying and selling politicians. They were already doing it. Now it's legal and they're doing it ridiculous. But also make corporations not have the same rights as natural people. They have only privileges which can be revoked. And people over profits. Yay. Peace.
Yay. No worries. All right, Neil.
Okay, so I want to say, through the lens of history, it's not ever doomed to fail. We've had a two-party system essentially since the second president of the United States on forward. And if I wanted to predict going forward, it's probably not going to change soon. The only thing that kind of makes me want to say that I'm a little bit less confident in that prediction is that you have the Democrats that are moving more towards the center in some ways, but also moving more towards the far left in other ways, like embracing Krugman's like neo-Keynesian policies for the economy. And then you have like the mainstreaming of Republicans believing in shit like monarchy and like, oh, all of the white people are going to die on Fox News every fucking night. So we're either going to see a party where the Democrats sort of become the centrist party, and there's the sane Republicans that end up forming a new one, and then it's just the batshit people that form the new John Birch Society. Or who knows, maybe we actually do come up with some sort of weird combination of like Twitch politics IRL. Who knows? Either way, it would give me an aneurysm.
Absolutely. Connor.
Dang! Did my sucked in breath drag you over to me? Yeah. Oh man. So it's not. No, it's absolutely not a foregone conclusion that we can't operate within the dynamics we have right now. If anything, I think that Twitch, social media, caucuses, all that kind of stuff, it actually gives politicians better access to their own constituency and to the American public as a whole. So we could do a lot of cool things that previous generations couldn't. Live town halls, live, AMAs, like all that kind of stuff. That I think Neo just alluded to is that I'm afraid that 20%, literally this is the most like civil and sane debate I've had in months. So basically, let me know if my connection goes out. It
went for a little, but please continue.
Yeah. So basically, this is the most civil and sane debate that I've had in months. And in the Twitch.tv politics sphere, the main people who do really, 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 really well are very aggressive, very hyperbolic cults of personality. And what I'm worried about is that that is going to translate into the political realm, where basically you're just going to have these hyperbolic cults of personality that are going to drag their constituency with them. And that's just going to be politics as pandering to this hyperbolic base and getting them jazzed up. That's what I'm worried about for the future. But the only thing that we can do is basically fight that. And I think that we fight that by having people like this go on to the more insane shows and make the cults of personality look stupid. And then I think it's also by us coming up with creative ways in which to forward politics and social agenda, environmental agenda, not necessarily through electoralism. Tio would probably agree with me with this, and it was an anarchist that first brought this to my attention, that anarchism doesn't necessarily look to create like a disordered society. It looks to create the social services provided by the government, create alternative structures within the community itself, and then the government is a redundant structure that no longer needs to exist, so it can dissolve that role. And over time, you can expand how the strength of communities to the point that the government becomes either non-existent or not necessary in a majority of its current roles. So what I would say is that's really cool, because there's a lot of really powerful tools that we have right now. Discord is an incredible tool. Social media is an incredible tool. Zoom obviously is an incredible tool. These are all things for us to basically communicate, create communities both online and IRL, and come up with solutions where we're not waiting for some, I won't swear, some guy in DC to save us from ourselves. And unfortunately, I think that's a lot of what people are waiting on, even within these cults of personality, is they want to take all of their emotional and financial energy, they want to export it to a savior, and then they want that savior to save them instead of taking that energy and putting it into something more positive that's local.
Preach it. Completely fair. Completely fair. Justin.
Well, sorry, really quickly.
Okay.
Anarchists and libertarians line up almost one for one with this motivation and this line of thinking, and then I'll leave it there.
Okay, completely fair. Yeah, that's a good assessment, though. So, Justin,
I don't think we're doomed for failure in a two-party system, but under the current course trajectory, we will fail. We'll probably descend into, a second civil war or something else. I mean, the Democratic Party to me has lurched so far to the left with its wokeism and CRT and its general like anti-white rhetoric that if you're a white heterosexual male, that you're immediately a bigot or a racist. There's going to be issues. To me, the Republican Party hasn't been conservative enough. But where's the balanced budget amendment? Where's the taxpayers' Bill of Rights that limits federal spending? And none of that has happened. Really, the last conservative that we had was Newt Gingrich's Congress, because when George W. Bush won, he governed and spent like a liberal. He was right on judges, right on the war, right on taxes. But the federal government's national debt, look at the national debt. We're approaching, $30 trillion. We can't sustain the kind of lifestyle that we have been on this current course trajectory. And the West, and I'm talking Europe and United States and Canada, are facing some real fundamental issues that nobody wants to address. One of them is the collapsing birth rate. We are being outbred by Muslims, by Chinese, by Indians, and these people don't believe in the same culture as the Western.
Not all of them, but please continue.
Yeah, well, European culture has dominated the globe for the last 700 years because of a common culture, exploration, scientific discovery. Not other cultures believe in all that. Not all cultures are equal. You can look at the terror in the people in Afghanistan right now as they're about to fall back under the Taliban and their form of culture. So the West doesn't want to address these kinds of issues, and it's a frightening prospect. 50 years from now, what America is going to look like, and it's not going to look the same that the founding fathers envisioned.
Can I address this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, this is obviously a real concern. I would say a lot of people in the alternative media space, 2015, 2016, brought this up. They were shouted out of, the Overton window, and now we see figures such as Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson kind of mainstreaming this narrative. What I would say in reference to this is that, especially when it comes to the Americas, Spanish colonial and Anglo-colonial societies are almost have the same narrative. They're both European. They both came over. They both genocided the Native Americans. They both, have a history of diversity and integration and immigration and all that kind of stuff. And then not just that, but also we need to look at the economics and progress in this issue as well. So the concern is that we have, people in the Middle East and North Africa, West Africa with higher birth rates. Well, you know what drops birth rates drastically? Access to birth control and improved material conditions. So basically, this isn't going to be something that lasts forever. And not just that, but when you have people who immigrate, typically 2 to 3 generations in, they 99% of them are integrated into the society that already exists. And then not just that, but if we look at these other countries and we start improving the material conditions in these other countries, then we're probably going to see a similar demographic shift. Not only are we going to see a similar demographic shift, but this similar demographic shift might be necessary for the salvation of the planet. What I mean by this is when you shift to a higher level of material consumption and carbon consumption, you basically have a larger environmental footprint. Global warming, I hate to inform the audience, is probably real. Basically human displacement of other species and killing other species is probably real. And as a result, if we actually reach a 2.15, 1.85, basically rate of replacement, and then we make up for labor with automation and new sources of energy, this might be a solution and not a problem. So this is an incredibly complex issue that's a little bit, I'll stop ranting in a second, but it's a little bit more complex than the Browns are having lots of kids, the whites aren't having any kids, and within 100 years, whites are going to be gone.
Yeah.
I think that's probably not accurate.
Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I would like to add on to that.
You next, Teal. After Neil, then you, Teal. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Connor's 100% right on that. Also, I mean, just to mention, the notion that you have to remember that when you say Muslim, you particularly mean a very specific region, normally Middle East, because most people forget that 99% of all Muslims live in a circle in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Okay. And that's where I'm at right now. And right now, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, we all have the lowest birth rates on record. Not only that, first and second generation Americans, at least from Asian societies, at least from this area of the world, seem to embrace American culture extremely well. I mean, who was there during the Rodney King riots defending their personal property when white people were out there fucking bitching and complaining and running around on the news? Fucking Koreans were up there fucking cracking shots at people. Okay? I don't give a shit. Fucking 10, 20, 30 years down the line, little fucking Johnny could be playing with my son and he could be a fucking race realist dipshit and get picked on, or he could just join the fact that everybody in the Western world likes anime now.
And also, just one quick addendum. I agree a lot with what Connor was saying, but just one thing I wanted to add: birth rates are also going down, not just because of contraception and industrialization, but also pollution. Like I was reading a scientific article talking about how a certain type of plastics, I forget, BHP or something like that, is causing men to get smaller penises and less sperm. So honestly, if people are concerned about a certain population of people dying out, then maybe we should think about the pollution thing a little more. Just thought I'd point that out.
There's probably a lot that plays into the whole low birth rate bit, but I'm not. That's a wholly different topic for a different time. So
no,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's called people signing up for Twitter.
No, yeah. No, I want to address this because
Go ahead.
so basically this is where I understand, like, liberals and leftists and progressives, they hear people being concerned about cultural shifts and demographic shifts, and they just scream it down. And I think that's unfortunate because basically, like, there's a real anxiety here, right? Back in 1965, I want to say it was like 85% of the United States was like European, like Anglo or surrounding Northern European based immigrants, with maybe like a 13% population of black folks and like a 2% population of Hispanics. We're now up to like 24% Hispanic. I think we're up to like 10 or 15% somewhere in there. Asia might be at like 5%, but I think it's supposed to grow pretty rapidly. And then basically black folks have been maintaining steady at like 13%. So by 2050, Anglo-descended European folks are going to be like 49% of the population. So this is a real anxiety that people have, that basically we're not going to be able to maintain our culture. We're not going to be able to maintain our economics. Things are going to fall apart because we're letting people in who don't understand it. Don't understand the currently existing culture, basically. What I would say is that we have experienced these things in the past, particularly with Irish immigration and German immigration. You can actually read Benjamin Franklin saying that he's very concerned with the rate of German immigration because he's afraid that it's going to become a German country, not an Anglo country. And what I would say is that, number one, we've dealt with these things in the past. Number two, we shouldn't commit seppuku yet. Number three, it could be really positive. Number four, especially when it comes to Central American and South American immigration into the United States, you probably have a lot more in common with these people than you think. And I think that's important to stress to a lot of people who are on the further right, because there's panic. There's anxiety, and they can't talk about it. It's not acceptable within the Overton window. And every time they bring it up, they just get called racist assholes. So that's where I wanted to crack open this
and I'd like
a little bit further.
And I'd like to add to it a little bit too, if I can.
90 seconds.
Quick. Yeah, not even that. I also am very critical of what I call liberal woke scolds. We should be having our rhetoric should be uniting people, not dividing people. So when they go on their critical of yes, I whenever you hear people talking about identity politics, be careful, look up. Don't punch out or kick down, punch up, because it's somebody above you manipulating you to their will. You know what I'm saying? If the working class if somebody's trying to keep the working class from united, think of why. Because normally it's them, both sides. They play both sides. They play the lemmings of both sides. So whenever everybody brings up identity politics, that's why they call me a class reductionist. Those woke skulls will call me a class reductionist because, I think material, to find material reasons to explain these cultural things and, environmental things. So
certainly. All right. Anybody else have any follow up with before we continue with the last question? Okay. So the last question. Okay. This is a little bit more of a personal answer in regards to this, but this is more of like, what's the one thing that you actually fear the most from your government? And what's the one thing you actually have the most hope for your government, like the most positive thing that you can think of? So let's go and start with Connor, 3 minutes.
Yeah. So the thing that I'm most fearful of is that I've kind of been like really slow on the climate change thing, very slow to consider it anything worthy of caring about. The limited research that I have done does look like it's something worth caring about, and it could severely impact the way that we live within the next century. Now, it's not going to kill us all. It's not going to kill all of humanity, all that kind of stuff, but it makes stuff really uncomfortable. I'm worried that because, as we mentioned, that politicians like to be bought. They don't like to think ahead, especially in democracies. The fights, the horizon is just 4 years. It's not 50 years or 100 years. I'm worried that we're not having a long-term look at our environmental impact, and as a result, we're fighting over terrorism and wars and demographic shifts and immigration, when realistically we could be ignoring the larger problem. That's my fear. The opportunities that I see, though, is that there is a changing of the guard when it comes to like generational stuff in politics. Basically, the boomer generation. I love my parents. I don't ever want them to die, but chances are they're going to move on at some point. So that basically means that there is going to be a change in the guard where Generation X is a very small generation. The millennials are going to be the next people at bat. There's a lot of things that millennials agree on, regardless of political disposition. Decriminalization of marijuana seems to be a really big thing. Reformation for the drug war seems to be a big thing. A little bit more of a libertarian or liberal lens when it comes to certain issues seems to be a big thing. Acceptance of LGBTQ people seems to be more common in the younger generation. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for massive political shifts within the next 30 years. I think we have to manage these shifts responsibly because basically we have really big boots to fill when it comes to the promise of America. So I'm terrified, but I'm excited, and maybe that's the best kind of terrified.
Certainly. Justin.
Well, I'm terrified whenever the Democrats have unified control of the government, of course. I mean, what I'm really upset or angry about is how the Republicans have ceded virtually every institution in this country to the leftists. We've lost education, Hollywood, the scientific community, the intelligence agencies, the FBI. Literally, all these agencies that are supposed to support the people seem to only serve one political master, and that, of course, is the Democrats. What I'm hopeful for is when they elect people, illegitimately like Biden, who are so incompetent, so, just beyond words of how awful he is that Republicans will once again resume control probably in 2022 and then in 2024. And then hopefully we can actually address some of the fundamental issues that the country is facing. Climate change could be one of them. The United States has been leading the way with cutting carbon emissions. I'm not sure what we do about, countries like India or China, which are increasing their carbon output, but the United States has led the way for technological advances, and we can continue to do that. But I really think the Republicans need to step up and really start to fight back in these areas that we have lost. Every Hollywood movie demeans corporations or Republicans. The scientific community deliberately withheld evidence that the COVID virus came from the Wuhan lab because they didn't want to benefit President Trump. I mean, these are things that would get people fired immediately from any job. And, don't forget the intelligence agency spying on Trump's campaign. I mean, that was considered no big deal, but Richard Nixon resigned his presidency when he ordered the break-in of the Democrat headquarters. So, I mean, these are things that Democrats think they can constantly get away with. So I'm afraid of this constant one-party police state that the Democrats are slowly forming, but I'm optimistic the GOP will take the reins again and hopefully fix it.
All right. Neo.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to say every time I hear somebody say that COVID came from a lab in Wuhan, I just think back to early 90s hip hop where everybody's rapping about how AIDS was made by the government to fucking kill black people or something. I'm sorry. I'm fearful of a generation where people actually believe that kind of bullshit. The thing is that if it came from a lab and you honestly believe this, why did nobody else in the lab get sick? Why was it one dude at a wet market? But that's beside the point. I'm fearful of a future where people honestly believe that there's no such thing as unity, where people believe that there are certain people in power and global elites that want to power bank and control the entire world. I do believe that this insularization of individuals and insularization of thought is leading us collectively into just a cultural aneurysm. I don't know. That's the thing that scares me more. The thing that scares me the most for the future is people's own hubris and stupidity.
Okay. What about hopeful?
I'm hopeful that at least I'll maybe have some more rights when I come back to the United States.
Okay. Fair enough. Tio.
All right, my biggest fear is that status quo will continue with the. I suggest you guys read a book called Dark Money by Jane. I forget her name, but Jane Mayers, I think. And also, Senator Whitehouse has done a lot of great presentations on how dark money has funded this current Supreme Court picks. That see, a lot of the people, the evangelical right, were tricked to thinking that these judges actually want to reverse Roe v. Wade, or want to reverse Affordable Care Act, or they want to what was the other thing? Reverse gay marriage. No, like they just want to make sure Citizens United doesn't get revoked. That's the number one thing. It's all about the money, man. And like, that's what worries me is a lot of our politicians are bought and sold. Citizens United, like I said, look it up if you don't know what that is. The positive I have is internet. The information is, there's so much more information out there than when I was a kid. You know, I'm probably the old guy in the group. I'm 45, 46. Sorry, I keep forgetting. There's so much more information. There's so many more people, like the Twitch. I know there's some toxicity with the Twitch community, but I've never seen so many people reading theory, and I've been an activist for 25 years. So I think there is some good that will come of it. I think sometimes it takes, like it took the Great Depression for the working class to, you know, because back then we had two strong socialist parties in the US. We had a strong Communist Party and a strong Labor Party. It takes the people rising up to get the, you know, the politicians are the last line, right? Mm-hmm. The corporations think they can be the puppet masters, but the people have the power. We got out of Vietnam because the people, the military industrial complex wanted to stay. The politicians wanted to stay. The people, you know, like Nixon literally parked buses nose to head around the White House because the people were coming. So, and I'm an anarchist pacifist. Like, I don't believe in violence, but I do believe in, you know, general, you know, assembly, tell your grievances to your government, and educating the working class. I'm for worker cooperatives. I'm for less people having too much economic power, leads to too much political power. So I'm afraid that and I do see people on the far right even waking up to realize that the political power is causing issues. I'm trying to unite the working class. Like I said earlier, don't punch out or down, or kick down, punch up. Make sure these moneyed interests, like we're voting. Like a lot of the people on the right, they ironically loved a New York real estate billionaire trust fund baby. What? That makes no sense to me, guys. I'm sorry. Like, we need to start voting for working class people who've had working class experience, who, you know, actually care about the people and not, you know, come up in these insular worlds where they don't know real life. You know, they like the newscasters, especially, like they don't live in reality, you know, and that's why the class struggle isn't as upfront. So,
all right, appreciate it. Anybody else have anything to address before we go into final thoughts, or are we good?
Straight.
All right, fantastic. So we'll go ahead and go into final thoughts. I just want to take the time to thank the panel for giving me their points of view. I felt like this was very constructive. So when it comes down to final thoughts, Justin, we'll start with you on your final thoughts. Just go ahead and talk about like how you felt about the panel, good, bad, ugly, the whole nine, or what you think, what you learned from it. So go ahead.
I felt the panel was great. I mean, seemed like there was more consensus than disagreement, and what we disagreed on, you know, nobody was really too far off. I mean, there's genuine issues brought up, genuine concerns, a lot of good theory and history and founding fathers. I mean, all good stuff. So I would definitely do it again with each and every one of them. Excellent.
Thank you. Tio.
Great panel. Final thoughts is, it's great that I love this platform you're giving us, Alex, like, you know, making sure we're not just talking over each other, giving everybody a fair chance to get their opinion, letting people respond. I think that's excellent. I'm so glad that everyone on this panel is a freedom-loving American, not a monarchist, pro-dictator, pro-fascist, or pro-authoritarian communist, you know, red, you know, I can't stand those red commies either. I call them authoritarian socialists. I'm a libertarian socialist. Glad that we could have open-minded, non-juvenile discussion, and I hope this continues, and I hope this becomes the norm more than just the optics game, and actually, you know, people actually sharing ideas and not just trying to win over their little crowd of people they already, you know, just trying to get the peanut gallery to cheer. which does nobody any good. So thanks,
Sure.
Alex. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your contribution. Neo.
Yeah, honestly, this is probably the first time in maybe my entire career as a streamer that I've been on a panel where I've not wanted to choke one of the guests. Unironically, this has been a really fun time. I definitely do this. Yeah, it's been really nice. I'm glad that we could have a civil conversation among adults and not resort to ad homs and just sit here and yell and scream at people. It's amazing.
Certainly. Well, thank you very much, Neo. I appreciate it. Connor.
Yeah, so no, I love that. It's fun. The only thing that I would say is we got to break open some of these cans of worms in these sore spots. So that's kind of where what I appreciated about the format is it's not so much like, hey, that guy just said this, so you're bad for this reason and this, that, like, basically having the opportunity to articulate like a fully formed idea and then have people respond afterwards or whatever is very productive. And then on top of that, I just needed this. But this is like I needed this for my soul. But this is unfortunately probably like eating vegetables. Okay, you need to do it. It's good for you, gives you essential vitamins and minerals, but unfortunately, unless it's covered in like butter and bacon and maybe a little bit of like sprinkled crack cocaine or something like that, then we're probably not going to addict anybody to positive adult dialogue. But I do want to say this: it's absolutely needed. And on top of that, this was my first opportunity because typically on a panel show, if anybody talks about like demographic shifts or immigration or anything like that, it's instantaneously, it's just racist. Racist, shut up. Let's not talk about it. You believe all this evil shit and you need to shut up right now. And that's what we do on twitch.tv all the time. So actually having the opportunity to have somebody bring up what I know are real concerns on the right wing, and then be able to address it from like a more like tactful perspective that I feel like I've researched a lot. I'm still feeling like butterflies, like right here, and I got like little tears in the corners of my eyes. So it was beautiful. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Basically, like usually I don't usually talk too much, but each of the final thoughts is what I say. So once again, thank you so much for all coming here. My final thoughts on this is the reason why I want to have these panels, and yes, hopefully I'll get down there and get some more controversial people. But what I try to do is I try to, we see these blood sports all the time, like on Twitch, like whether it's the politically provoked or the hippy dippy roundtable or whoever's like the big name hosts that are hosting these, and you'll usually see people just start sparring, just getting at it, like who's the alpha of this conversation. And, those are fine, and some people get a kick out of those. But me, I just feel like it's better to hear somebody's point of view. Now, there are some people that I won't bring on this panel, but that's for me to worry about. But I try to bring people on that I feel like can express their points of view, can actually get it out there in a articulate manner. And that way we all can kind of see, oh, I see where you're coming from in that point of view. And even if people at the end of the day don't always agree on this, it's good for us to have this discourse and to have this dialogue. I feel it's really, really important. It's something that we are sadly lacking right now. I mean, you see on some college campuses, you can't get a word out edgewise sometimes. And, I'm a centrist. I mean, I'm an independent that leans left, but I like to hear other people's points of view. And there are people out there that I don't necessarily agree with, but, I'm still willing to get out there and engage with them. Now, if I don't want to engage with something, I just don't talk to them. It's not because I'm scared of them. It's just because I just don't feel like I'm going to learn anything from them. But that's my own personal dialogue. Now, if I want to bring them on, they're definitely going to get their fair shake. They're definitely going to get their fair shot. And I want to make sure that anytime I bring a panelist on, we all show each other that same courtesy. And I just want to say thank you very, very much. As far as keeping this panel going and for expressing your points of view. And if you can just hang real quick for me after the end credits, just talk to y'all real quick. But once again, thank you everybody for tuning into tonight's panel. It was a very exciting panel. I've got another panel for tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about mental health. That's also going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if anybody would be willing to come out to that panel, please feel free to do so. It's going to be right here on YouTube, same format. So thank you so much, everybody, again, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks so much. Wait, one. And stream is done. Well, thank you so very much, everybody. I appreciate the talking with everybody. It was a really good panel, I feel. So, I mean, I'm glad everybody else was all about it too. So,
yeah, it was awesome. I'd be curious to have an economics discussion with all these gentlemen, actually, and Neo. Sorry, Neo.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be where we would, I think, have more disagreement, honestly. It's interesting. That is economics, because you mentioned neo-Keynesianism. It's like, wow, somebody else that has actually read some macroeconomics. That was a pleasant surprise. And even Connor actually knowing something about anarchism was a pleasant surprise too.
Well,
so
Demon Mama kicked my butt on a one-on-one conversation one time where I was like, anarchism is just an unrealistic society at some point in the future, and it's dumb. And she was like, hold up, let me explain this for a minute. And then I was like, hold up, literally a libertarian ANCAP could have said half of these things and we would have had the same conversation. And on top of that, I root a lot of my stuff in libertarianism. I'm incredibly sympathetic to people who want to create parallel structures to currently existing society. Because basically the only time that I want government to intervene is when it's necessary. Exactly. If it's not necessary, then society is already functioning. And if society is already functioning, then you have happy, healthy, functional people. So it's not even a problem to begin with. But just to let y'all know, I was going to answer some questions for chat after this, so I'm still live. So no slurs.
Okay, gotcha. Of course. I do apologize that Adam Kokich couldn't make it. I still haven't heard from the guy that schedules his debates and panels, so I don't know what happened. So I'll be sure to let y'all know what happened. So I do apologize that he didn't show up. So
it was still beautiful.
It was good. Yeah. So, but yeah, if anybody has any questions for me or something like that, I mean, they're welcome to ask me questions as well. I mean, I've already ended my stream, so if you want to continue it, you're welcome to. So,
are you still mad I drove you into that ditch?
Oh my God! So we're down into Fort Stewart, Georgia, and what was it? And we I can't remember what we were gonna go do, but he's just driving straight ahead. We were something logistics wise, and I'm like, I don't think there's a road that way. And he's like, oh, we'll be fine. And I'm like, yeah, he's never led me down the wrong path before. Boom, just smash right into a ditch. It's like, God damn it. Oh God, we put on so many miles down there. Oh God, about 2,000 miles in 2 weeks. So it just is unreal. So
that's a lot.
Well, my chat's getting antsy, so I'm gonna jump. But Alex, right. I wouldn't mind having a talk about military service and all that kind of stuff. And then it was a pleasure speaking with all of y'all. So if any of you guys want to do another panel or a one-on-one or anything like that, I'm completely open to all of that. But
certainly, just shoot me a message, anybody. So thank you all so very much. I'm really grateful for y'all coming out here tonight. So thank you so very much. Take care now.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Everybody have a good.
All right, give me 1 second, chat. I am moving to the other one. All right, cool. So I'll be reading your comments. If you want to ask questions, start doing it now. Do @counterpoints in the chat, and I'll address it. We already had a really interesting question from Rollin. So yeah, I'm really excited to get to that. But let's start with Sanguine Entertainment. I'm glad that civil conversation outbred the potential spiciness. Yeah, so just to let y'all know, I know we got about 40 people here or so. I do enjoy spicy, fighty stuff, but every now and then it just gets exhausting. It just gets tiring. So a healthy, wholesome conversation is actually pretty dope. Not all the time, but you need a palate cleanser every now and then. So I'm not complaining at all. So no, I liked everyone. And actually Justin is the exact kind of person that I need to talk to, because I don't think he's probably heard any of the arguments that I brought up in this debate, before this conversation. And I'll answer. Okay. So I think this was from Rollin. Do you actually think it's productive to give a civil response to people bringing up dog whistle subjects like demographic shifts? Yes, I do. Because when it comes to dog whistles, most people are not the effectiveness of dog whistles is that the people who know that they're dog whistles use them, and they use it to imply a more nefarious subject. Whereas some people use dog whistles because they can't hear them, as debate points that actually haven't been broken down and explained. So my job is not to convince the people who know how to use dog whistles, because to them, they've already made up their mind and it's kind of difficult to get them to back down. My job is to talk to the people who are using the dog whistles without knowing it to explain the subject further. That way they, but I think I think it's absolutely necessary, and it's a huge part of what I want to do. Jeffrey Miller says, what did you have for dinner? I had macaroni and cheese and a like tofurkey sandwich, and it was normal mac and cheese. I don't do that diet shit. I hate that stuff. So like I'm like 90% vegetarian, but I eat meat when other people make it, and then I make meat every now and then for myself, but I really reduce my meat intake a lot. BB Wolf says, great panel. Thank you. I know it was fairly tame. I know like people really like the blood sportsy stuff, but again, it's a palate cleanser. You need this kind of stuff every now and then. It's good for your soul. All right, Joker's Poker at Counterpoints. Do you think that late-term abortion should be legal if the baby is found to have a genetic illness that will cause them to suffer a terrible and painful life? Do I think they should be legal? Yes. During my AMA, I answered this question, and basically my line is 20 weeks. 20 weeks if the fetus and the mother are healthy. After that point, it should be banned. But if they have like Tay-Sachs or some like horrible genetic condition that's just going to cause either the mother to die or the fetus to die or the fetus to suffer, then there's still medical interventions that are probably necessary. Taylor M says, at Counterpoints, yes, I think it's as warranted as bringing up free speech censorship in regards to preferred gender pronouns. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what this is in reference to, but if you're saying like, is it necessary to discuss these subjects, free speech versus like using neopronouns or whatever? Yeah, I think you have to break down these things, because a lot of people just get like woke scolds or lefty Twitter mobs coming after them, and then they just dig their heels in and they never want to do it again. Wolf King, doubt he'll be deal with Sitch and Adam. I care about language, and that if I prefer, I can communicate to everyone. Have a good one. Yeah, Neo Morai, I don't know if you're still here in the chat or whatever, but it was awesome speaking with you. We should absolutely do a one-on-one soon. I think we align probably a lot, so it would be nice to speak with somebody who I actually align with, because there's not very many of us. Sanguine Entertainment at Counterpoints, what is the most controversial law or regulation you would remove? Most controversial law or regulation I would remove? I'm not thinking of anything off the top of my head. I'm a status quo warrior. I like the way society is working. I just think we need to implement it. Maybe like this is not a controversial law at all, but like weed should absolutely be recreational nationwide. So it should be moved to a class 2 drug, because it does have medical uses, as soon as possible by the DEA and whoever runs that stuff. And then it should be legalized for recreational use as quickly as possible, because we're throwing a lot of time and energy into arrest that just doesn't make sense. Taylor M, how could a government incentivize increase in native reproduction rates if the data shows that when one is financially prosperous, they tend to have less kids? Yeah, Taylor M, that's an important conversation, isn't it? Because the richer you get, the less kids you have. You get 2, you know that they're going to survive. You know that every kid that you have is a little bit less time that you're going to have to spend, going to Disney and going on ski vacations and stuff. So you typically only have 2 kids. So yeah, rich people only have 2 kids. It's not a problem if the population stabilizes, and as long as nobody's getting massacred, it's not that big of a deal. And if we can create stable, healthy, happy, liberal, democratic societies, then ultimately, like, the ethnic makeup doesn't matter, as long as we can create healthy, happy, stable societies. So we shouldn't care about the ethnic component unless it's like absolutely necessary, and we figure that out through some kind of scientific analysis that we have to have a certain amount of Anglos and a certain amount of Hispanics and a certain amount of this and a certain amount of that in order to create a stable society. If we can't, back that up with some kind of evidence, then that's just a dumb hill to die on. I am Canadian. At Counterpoints, do you feel Justin was speaking in good faith or pure dog whistling? I think he is speaking in good faith. I know that when it comes to lefties or whatever, like they're so used to alt-right pundits being like so disingenuous. I don't think that's it at all. I think Justin probably literally just got done watching Tucker Carlson, probably watched like an old Lauren Southern video, watched an old some other video from like a alt-light figure from 2016, and he believes exactly what he says. So I don't think everybody's dog whistling whenever they bring up dog whistle subjects. Neo Morai, it felt great to leave a panel without having my voice strained. Yeah, that was it was nice and relaxing. Mad Puppet says, do you see any issues with language in America due to demographic shifts? It will be Spanish, something all kids need to learn in the future. So I went to a law enforcement academy where literally 70% of the people were of Hispanic ethnicity and didn't speak a word of Spanish. They literally all spoke English. So yeah, I think I answered this question during the AMA, and I kind of did a really bad job because I was tired. So I think English should be the mandated primary language of the United States of America in all schools, like English. I love English. It's a culturally powerful language. I love it. But I do think that not Spanish, but a secondary language should be required in elementary, middle, and high school, meaning that our kids learn to speak Chinese, learn to speak Spanish, learn to speak whatever. And the reason why I bring that up, one, it helps native students be able to continue practicing their languages in an educational setting. Two, it gives American, European students the opportunity to learn a new language, and that does a lot of really positive things for your brain. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So so I think English should absolutely be a mandated language inside the United States, but multilingualism or bilingualism is a good thing. So this will probably be the last one. Sanguine Entertainment, what is your least favorite stance many on the most libertarians hold as policy? Oh my God. So for libertarians, my frustration is the moral weight that they put to like social compulsion. I think like social compulsion is a necessary part of any society. So and I don't think that like people will just pay for everything because they think that they want it. Like, no, I think everybody's going to want all of the services, and they're going to be real stingy when the check comes around. So I think anarcho-capitalist or libertarians in general are very unrealistic with how they think society is going to work. But I will be back in 11 minutes for Mask Off, so I invite y'all to come back at me with another 10 minutes or so, and then I'll read this one. Not a question, but you are the most lefty right-winger I know. Yeah, Rollin, that's totally fine, but I hate direct democracy, I hate leftism, I hate socialism, I hate communism, and all of my understandings of those are like descriptive understandings of the problems while completely disagreeing with the prescriptions. So while I might be the most left right winger I would absolutely get the fucking wall. So, if there was a leftist revolution, like a communist or socialist revolution, I would absolutely fight it, and if I needed to, I would die fighting it. So where can we sorry, you guys keep asking questions. Earthman Brick says, where can we see your Warhammer builds? Twitter. So I post Twitter when I'm done. Honestly, maybe I'll just like do a maybe I'll just do like a whole bunch of Warhammer posts. But if you at me on Twitter or DM me, I'll send you I'll send you some pictures. But anyways, I'm gonna go get some water in, water out. See y'all in 10 minutes. Catch you in a bit. Bye.